Welcome back to the PolitBureau with me, Aldrin Simpier. Tomorrow, MPs get to debate President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address. For 9 hours, the president will sit and have to listen to how his speech is being interpreted. While ANC MPs will be part of the debate, it's really the opposition that we should be focusing on. This is their opportunity, especially the new MPs, to assert their arrival and take on the posture of the boogeyman, to scare even the first citizen that you are being watched. Political analyst Professor Siepe is joining us in studio. Unfortunately, Professor Kwandiwe Kondlo could not make it, but Professor Siepe, thank you so much for your time. Do you think, first of all, that the opposition will rise to the occasion?
Well, from reading from the reaction after the speech, they felt that the president was underwhelming. And all of them actually said they like that he's talking about dreams. But what South Africa is going through is a nightmare. That we have a whole number of crises. We have a crisis in the economy. And the economic crisis expresses itself through lack of growth. Then you also have a social crisis that is there in our communities. You see our communities always in the streets complaining. And then you also have a crisis at the level of the state's capacity to deliver. I mean, the load sheddings that we've had, and on the economic front, we also had what they call technical recession since he took over. So there was a lot of anticipation and hype around his assumption of presidency. And you remember there were languages that we had a new lexicon, words like Ramaphoria. Then some people later, after 3 months, talk about the Ramaroon and talk about Ramageddon. But effectively, they were saying this was far greater hype. So people had hoped.
Is it wearing off?
I think it's wearing off once you get into government. And part of the problem is not the president's failures. It is that our challenges are structural. They're not about individuals. You can put a Deputy Jesus there. If you don't address the structural issues, you are going to fail. And the president himself is aware of that. And in his State of the Nation address, he did actually say that our challenges are largely structural. But what we have done, we've chosen an easy way of looking at scapegoats. So we individualize our challenges instead of saying, what is it that requires all of us to put our hands on deck?
The point that was made by Julius Malema after the State of the Nation address was that even if you look at the ANC benches, they didn't stand up and applaud the president as they would normally do. But then I go even further and say that if you look at the president's speech, his inaugural State of the Nation address last year, the opposition, the entire House, were on their feet when they heard Tumamina. And it would seem that all of that has just suddenly disappeared.
Well, I mean, if you look at each and every president, I mean, even Jacob Zuma, when he got in, there was hope because the previous president was disliked. The only person who had it easy was Mandela. But when Mandela stepped aside, there was a question of whether Thabo Mbeki will fit the shoes. But with the Thabo Mbeki and the HIV/AIDS and also what people felt were dictatorial tendencies, there was a sense that the sooner he goes, the better. So when Jacob Zuma came in, there was this excitement. But by the time he left, the members of the ANC also wished him well. They wanted to leave. So you found the same thing with Ramaphosa, that once he got in, it was the argument that he'll be better than the previous one. But once you get into power, into positions, then you realize that turning a ship like a state is very difficult.
But why hasn't he been able to hold on to that level of confidence that he had from society and the level of popularity, when unlike any other president, he had a one-year head start?
Yeah, he had a one-year start, but that was also a disadvantage because effectively during that first year, he had to make a number of promises. One of the promises that he made, and if people were to go back to his promises when he was campaigning, was that once he took over, the economy will go by 3%. But since he's taken over, we have had more challenges in the economy. Even as he delivered this State of the Nation address, he had to acknowledge that our economy is also not doing well. So you are faced with these realities. It is easier to ride on the crest of a wave as a newcomer, but the problem is, once you get in there, you realize that the machinery moves very slowly.
There's actually a post from, what's it called, Mpia Ketlamini, who posted this, an opinion piece that he'd written. And just listen to what he says. He says, a vision of the future is important, but visions are only meant to come into fruition when the visionary is no longer in office, especially when no credible plan is presented, should be looked at with suspicion. That there should be a level of suspicion at which people then look at the president, because he didn't give us a deadline and said that this is what will happen in this particular time, and that this particular minister will do this and that and that. So you don't have the timeline, you have the vision, but you don't have the timeline and you don't have the plan of how to make sure that that vision actually comes to fruition.
Well, that is true. I mean, the biggest challenge, and it's not only with President Ramaphosa, it's with the ANC presidents. When you give a State of the Nation address, one would have thought that it would be where you talk to the nation about where we are and where we are going. That is where you talk about the state of the nation. But then there's a challenge where, as a leader of a party, there's a manifesto that tells you that once you get in government, this is what we expect. So the president has a duty to almost give direction. So when he made pronouncement, some of those were programmatic. And because you have so many departments, you find that he touches on too many things. But what people want, even though he tried to say, let us cut down to 5 things, but it is when he reduced to 5 things that he moved into dreams. And people say, Chief, we have a nightmare right now. And deal with the nightmare. Don't tell us about dreams. And this is where the opposition, at least they were united in that we're not impressed because of the absence of the plans, the deadlines.
Yeah. They spoke about the nightmares. This is now the opposition. But I wonder whether there's still the worst. The worst is yet to come. Because if you look at the economy and if you look at different companies that are retrenching, especially in the financial sector, that are letting go of workers, I wonder then that isn't the worst yet to come, where the president would wake up to a situation where Stats SA come back and say, actually the unemployment rate is now increased. We're now sitting at around 30%, if not more.
Yeah, I think the worst is still come. And if people listen to the president carefully, he says he imagines that in about 5 to 10 years, you'll have unemployment cut or new players, new young people, about 2 million getting into the job market, or getting employed. But if you think about the labor market, every year you have about 300,000 young people who get in. So effectively, if you have 10 million, and your hope is in 10 years, you're going to have 2 million. That means you're going to have 200,000 every year that we employ.
Yeah.
And effectively, the 10 million that is out of a job will remain out of the job. So even in his own best plans, you see an element of failure. So this is where the opposition, if they do the calculation, they say, Mr. President, we have 10 million. 2 million is not sufficient.
Yeah. I actually think that the opposition tomorrow should tell the president that the national development plan must be thrown out of the window, because clearly, even on your own plans, you won't be able to meet the targets that are set there. Professor Siepe, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
And when we come back, Spinners and Spanners.